things continue to get crazy in the NFL as trades are happening. People are starting to try to make moves. And of course, there's free agents all over the league that everyone's asking, where are they going to go as more players get released throughout this offseason? Now, we're going to talk about what the Steelers need to do, ranking their top priorities position-wise, and then exploring each of those positions as we go throughout the show. And I say we because it's myself, Chris Carter, host of the Locked On Steelers podcast, joined by Jenna Harner of Channel 11 WPXI. It's going to be a fun episode. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Steelers, your daily Pittsburgh Steelers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome to the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter, bringing you your daily dose of all things of the Pittsburgh Steelers. As always, you can find us on Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Odyssey, and YouTube. If you're watching this video on YouTube, hit the like button because that helps us out. Hit the subscribe button to get all of our daily content Monday through Friday and sometimes on the weekends right here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. We appreciate you making us your first listen every day. If you want to help us out, give us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts with a positive comment. You both at the same time. You get a shout out at the end of the show. Joining me today is Jenna Harner. Jenna, we gave you last week off because you deserved vacation. You deserved your time in the sun, but you're back and you're hard at work, and we see you.
Oh, well, thank you so much, Chris. It is so nice to be back. It was a wonderful couple days away, just kind of recharging the batteries, getting ready. But we have a whole lot to talk about because, my goodness, it has been probably the most insane couple of days in the NFL. It almost feels like, NBA trades with what's been going on lately.
Yeah, this is what NBA. This is like Kevin Durant. You're on the other side of the country now. That's what it's like. Now, of course, the biggest news that came out Thursday, Khalil Mack, and of course, we're recording this at like 5:00 in the afternoon. There could be something crazy that happens in the next hour. So if you think like, wow, Chris, you missed Patrick Mahomes getting traded to the Raiders, like something stupid, like that happening. like we're gonna miss that. All right, we had to film at a certain time, but Khalil Mack going to the Chargers for a second and 6th round pick. First of all, that's the dumbest compensation I've ever heard in my life. I don't know what the Bears are thinking. But second of all, the AFC West is loaded. But Jenna, here's an interesting part of this. Yes, the Chargers now have Joey Bosa and Khalil Mack and Justin Herbert and Keenan Allen and Mike Williams and everybody else known to man. But at the same time, they were a major player in free agency because they had a ton of free agent money. And I want to see how this financial compensation comes out for Khalil Mack because he was going to have a lot of dead money in Chicago. But if they if the Los Angeles Chargers are taking on a good bit of his cap hit, then that could make them a lot less of a player in free agency and another team the Steelers don't have to outbid when they're looking for some of these players that we're going to be talking about soon.
Yeah, no, this is going to be really interesting to kind of see how the dominoes really fall here because, again, there are those teams that have the money to spend that the Steelers have money to spend, and they're going to kind of be keeping eyes on and saying, all right, well, if you have this amount of money, maybe you're not going to be this high spender we once anticipated you to be. Or, if they do work something out and get it to be a little bit of a smaller number than anticipated, then it's like, wow, they still have a lot of reinforcements that they're going to be able to use and money that they're going to be able to spend other places. So this is always kind of that fun part of the year too, where you watch the dominoes fall and see kind of, all right, and even just, we've seen it too the last couple of days with shifting in quarterbacks, teams, who might not need a quarterback now because of the trades that they made, et cetera, et cetera. So this is the fun part, right?
It certainly is the fun part. This is, when everything can be changing. The NFL, it's going to look different. We go to sleep one morning, come back the next, and it's like, what just happened? Like, for example, if Jenna had gone to a remote location on vacation and had no contact with the outside world, and she came back and she said, Russell Wilson's a Bronco, that's the kind of stuff that happens with the NFL. So that's why this stuff's fun to talk about. But let's get to talking about some of the Steelers' top needs now. Listing the needs, it's obvious. Yes, quarterback's in the mix for those who want to say quarterback, but the Steelers, we know they're not going to be heavy players there. They didn't go after Aaron Rodgers. They didn't go get Russell Wilson in the trade. There's no big name on the free agent market other than Mitchell Trubisky, Jameis Winston. So quarterback, to me, we're pushing that out of the way right now. But what we're really talking about here, Jenna, is interior offensive lineman, whether it's center or guard, offensive tackle, linebacker, cornerback, and strong safety.
Yeah.
Now, Jenna, for my money, the offensive line, it's tricky because you can approach this a few different ways. Because if you go get an offensive tackle, it says, okay, maybe if you just get a guard or a center in the draft, you're a lot better. But if you go sign a center, then it asks the question, do you get a guard? But I think one of the top priorities in this free agency period is making sure the Steelers do have an additional free agent veteran on their roster that they sign in this free agent period, whether it's Ryan Jensen, Terron Armstead, or someone far back, maybe a Ben Jones or someone like that. But to me, that's a major priority for the Steelers. They need a veteran presence on the offensive line, even if it's just a guy who's going to be around for a couple years.
Yeah, no doubt about that, for plenty of reasons, starting with the fact that you're going to want to protect whoever you have under center this season. And hey, whether it's Mason Rudolph, whether it's one of the quarterbacks potentially that there are still available in free agency, or whether it's a rookie, or whether it's Dwayne Haskins, again, we could talk about all those options ad nauseum. But whether it's one of those guys, you're obviously going to want to protect them. And you're also going to want to bolster your run game because, hey, you have Najee Harris in the backfield. And we know what he is capable of, especially when he has a dominant offensive line in front of him. It was so interesting, and I keep going back to this too. When we spoke with Kevin Colbert for his availability pre-combine, he kind of talked about a whole lot of things, but he had said, like, the one thing he said, if I did have one regret, it probably the season or last offseason, it probably was not adding a veteran offensive lineman to that group, just to kind of give that voice of reason. Because again, we know how young they were. We knew that was going to be such, we talked about that at length to start the season. What's going to happen with these young guys? How are they going to look? You're having two rookies in there, but now he said, we almost wish we could have done that. So this is your chance to go do that, especially now that you have these second-year guys who got that experience last year to learn from a veteran and, hey, figure more things out up front, whether it is like a guy like Ryan Jensen, like you said.
Now, here's the different ways they can approach this. Terron Armstead, right now, I think he's the one that everyone's chasing after. He's a 30-year-old, offensive tackle from the Saints. He's going to get big bucks. He's probably going to get anywhere from $17 to $20 million a year with his contract. That's a big ask. But Ryan Jensen, more doable. He's also 30 years old. You'd expect him anywhere from $10 to $13 million a year. Other guys, though. Brandon Scherff, guard from the Washington Commanders, still ain't with that name.
I'm referring to them. I'm putting this out there. I said this the other day. In my mind and out loud, they will be the team formerly known as the Washington Football Team. That is what they are. Basically,
if you go to the Draft Network and you see their name come up, they come as the Washington Washingtons, and it's funny every time I see it. And I'm just like, yes, because forget their name. That's stupid.
That's it.
But with the offensive linemen, there are still other guys, Laken Tomlinson of the 49ers, Connor Williams of the Cowboys, James Daniels of the Bears. Again, Ben Jones, a veteran center, 32 years old, so a little bit older, but a guy who you could plug in there and say, hey, if everything else falls apart, he could be there for you. And then, of course, there's still guys like Morgan Moses, Eric Fisher, Brian Allen, Trent Brown, guys that you could add in and say these are the veteran presence you're looking for. But Jenna, there's important pieces on defense that I think may be the side that they add the most in free agency to add to this group right now. We'll talk about those positions in just a second. But first, we got to talk to you about betonline.net. Betonline.net, remember, with football season done, college basketball, March Madness is here. It's right here for us. The conference tournaments are going on right now. But if you want to get the latest odds, contests, and player props on the conference tournaments and March Madness when the big dance begins, betonline.net is your number one source for all your sports betting needs and info. BetOnline remains the best spot for all your sports scores, podcasts, and news this season. And it's not just basketball. BetOnline has your continued source for all your sports wagering information needs on hockey, UFC, with baseball being back, baseball too. So that's awesome, including live betting and your favorite Vegas casino games. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in the action at BetOnline, where the game starts. Back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast, I'm your host, Chris Carter, here with Jenna Harner of Channel 11 WPXI. Jenna, the next position that I have here to look at here that I think is right, the next thing the Steelers have to do after the offensive line. It may come first as far as, the order of when they do it, but I have to look at cornerback because this team is right now, as it stands right now, they haven't re-signed anyone. Maybe they do tonight. Maybe something happens. But as it stands, this team has losing Joe Haden and Ahkello Witherspoon, and they're only getting Cameron Sutton back. They got Justin Lane on the roster, James Pierre, like guys that aren't selling you like, hey, we're the top guys. So there's a few guys out there that you kind of say, okay, you could work with. But in this, I think that one of the big easiest answers is bringing back Ahkello Witherspoon. You can bring him back on a 2 or 3 year deal, make it like $5 to $6 million, and say, hey, if you do well, we'll keep you around even longer. He's about to be 27 years old. You saw what he did for you last year. There's some hope there. I know that there's a lot of people that are on the Joe Haden bandwagon, and hey, I love Joe Haden. You love Joe. He's a great guy to talk to in the locker room. He's a great leader for the team, but he's about to turn 33. That's a lot to ask of a corner in the NFL. But on top of that, Jenna, this is going to be an insane cornerback free agent class. J.C. Jackson, of course, at the top of it with 26 years old, an interception king in the NFL. Then he's followed by Stephon Gilmore and Carlton Davis as your top 3 cornerbacks here. Jenna, what is your likelihood of the Steelers getting one of their guys back and getting one of those top highs? Is that a real possibility, or is that a hope for Steelers fans that they should not hold on to too long?
I mean, I think it might be a little bit of a combination of both, because I really, really think what they need to do, like you said, is bring Ahkello Witherspoon back. We saw what he's capable of. He got, his feet under him and really, learned this system. And we saw him thrive at the latter part of the season. He is talented. He probably is one of the hardest working players. And I know you can say that about a lot of guys. Of course, all of them work hard, et cetera, but that is something he takes to heart so much and makes it a point of emphasis. He wants to, your classic, get better every day, but he wants to work as hard as he can. And you see that anytime he had the opportunity last year, he really did seem to make the most of it. And I think he's an absolutely good piece they can build around. I don't realistically see, or I guess know, if Joe Haden is going to be back again, just because of his age and because of what they may or may not want to give him. But they have hope in this defense. They know that probably this season again, we don't know who's going to play quarterback yet, but they may have to rely on that defense to kind of be the defense it was a couple years ago, right when they had gotten Minkah Fitzpatrick in the fold, with the season when they had Mason and Duck. I think that might be the style of defense at least this team is looking to get back to, especially when you look back and realize, hey, the quarterbacks you're playing against in your division and now in the AFC as a whole, they're going against some really high caliber young guys, which we know. I realistically think, again, because they have money that they haven't had to spend, or they haven't been able, or they have money to spend that they haven't had. So you go after a big guy. Are they going to be going after these aggressive, we heard, honestly, it was I think it was Kevin Colbert. It was either Kevin Colbert or Art Rooney II. But, the guys in the front office said that they don't really anticipate their identity changing too much when it comes to being the front of the line guys that go and spend all the money and get the big guys. At the same time, you have such a strong defensive core that you can build around right now. So almost why wouldn't you, especially when it's such an area of need for your team? Realistically, they could go after one of these big guys. I wouldn't be surprised, at least if their name is in the mix for some of, the Justin Jacksons, the Stephon Gilmores, because again, you have the ability, you have the money. Yes, there are other areas of need, but that seems like it's a big gaping hole, especially when you don't know what the future is going to be with Joe Haden and Ahkello Witherspoon.
Exactly. I agree with you there, because figuring that out is a major issue. Figuring out, one, you need to figure out who's going to be the one guy that you keep, because I do think they will keep at least one guy in the mix there. But two, you also have to make sure that you're adding a top guy here, and this is why I think it's very important, extremely important, Jenna. You're in a division now with Jamar Chase and Joe Burrow. You just saw what they were doing to everybody across the league, and on top, they still got T. Higgins, and they still got Tyler Boyd, of course, the guy from Pittsburgh. So you need at least one lockdown star cornerback in your roster. And, I doubt that you find that in the draft. I doubt that I've talked about this week, we looked at a mock draft from one of our Locked On Draft guys, and Andrew Booth Jr. fell to the Steelers, but he didn't have them taking him. A move like that would be interesting. But Andrew Filippomi of 93.7 The Fan here in Pittsburgh. He said he had a source that said the Steelers are seriously considering or looking at Carlton Davis. Now, Carlton Davis, a good physical big-time corner. He's been a Super Bowl champion with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. He's played with them for the last 4 years. Now, big thing, he's never played a full season. He only played 10 games last year. That's where I'm still kind of like, I truly think that I know that it's the Steelers. Kevin Colbert said, no, we're not changing who we are, right? He did say that, but there has to be an acknowledgement where it's like, look, this is a different kind of year, and we have a chance to set a new tone with things. And if they can get the top cornerback of this NFL draft, of this NFL free agent class, and a guy who's a game changer, J.C. Jackson, with all the interceptions he can get, he can take away like a half of the field. That's something that I think this Steelers team can't pass up, and it would perfectly fit as a major gain for the team, while also fitting a major need. Whereas, if you got that on, if you got like a really like if you got Bobby Wagner, and we'll talk about him in a sec, linebacker, a big important need, but there's a gaping hole at cornerback that you have to fill, and you have to fill it now.
Yeah, that is one of those. Where do you think is the biggest hole of need, and where is the most urgency going? And I think you have to put cornerback near the top, if not at the top of that list, just because of, who you go against in the division. Like you said, you're facing, the offensive threats that Cincinnati has, for the next handful of years. We know what Jamar Chase is capable of. He was burning everybody left and right. So you need that playmaker to go out there and, have a guy that can do it. And I think whoever you get, and if you do bring Witherspoon back, I think the two would mirror each other really, really well.
I agree. I think that would be an impressive pair, and you still have Cam Sutton, who can play in the slot, back up whoever gets hurt. So say you get Carlton Davis and he goes down, you still know you have Cam Sutton who can bounce outside, and then you could try to put a backup guy in at slot cornerback. I have been thinking about a guy that I covered for the last 2 years at the University of Pittsburgh, Damari Mathis. He looks like a guy that could really play the slot. He's physical, he's fast, ran a sub 4.4 in the 40-yard dash at the combine. We'll see him run at the March 21st Pitt Pro Day again. But Jenna, I think that there's some interesting moves there. But I want to talk to you, Jenna, about two more positions. I just mentioned linebacker, but before we even get to that, I think there's one position that people are forgetting that is really important and might be the simplest of moves that the Steelers have to do. We'll talk about that in a second here. But first, going to talk to you guys about Built Bar. It's that time of the year where everyone starts to give up on the New Year's resolution, but not you. You're sticking with your resolution. Why? Because you got Built Bar on your side. And not only Built Bar, but Built Bar's new Puffs Built Bars. Because Built Bars, remember, they're the protein bar that tastes like a candy bar. The Puffs flavors are the first ever protein-infused marshmallow. They're fluffy, marshmallowy, and they're not just a protein bar. They're a treat. They're covered in 100% real chocolate and come in amazing flavors like cinnamon churro, coconut marshmallow, banana cream pie, and all the different flavors that are available when you go to Built.com. But also you can get regular Built Bars, but all Built Bars, whether they're Puffs or regular Built Bars, are still covered in 100% real chocolate, low calorie, but high in protein. The average Built Bar has 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, 4 net carbs, and 17 grams of protein. Compare that to the average candy bar with 240 calories, 30 grams of sugar, and dozens of net carbs. It's an easy change that's going to help you stick to your diet. And there's so many flavors to choose from: coconut almond, peanut butter brownie, double chocolate, raspberry, cookies and cream, salted caramel, mint brownie, and many more, all available at Built.com with limited time flavors always coming out each month. Go to Built.com right now, and when you get a Built Bar delivered to your door, be sure to use the promo code LOCKED15. That's LOCKED15, LOCKED15, and you'll get 15% off your next order of Built Bars at Built.com. Back here in the Locked On Steelers podcast, I'm Chris Carter here with Jenna Harner of Channel 11 WPXI. Jenna, we'll talk about Bobby Wagner in a second, also Jordan Hicks, because he's now a free agent from the Arizona Cardinals, and I think he acquitted himself quite well out in Arizona. But before we even get to that with you, I truly think one of the bigger needs the Steelers have right now is strong safety, because Terrell Edmunds is not on the team right now. He's heading to free agency. We've seen that, the Steelers are interested in bringing him back, but I get that Terrell Edmunds might want to test the market. But here's the thing. This is an insane free agent market for safeties right now that I think he'd have a hard time competing in to get serious money. We already know Jesse Bates got his franchise tag, so he's off the board, but he got replaced by Landon Collins, who was let go by the Washington something. And the
Washingtons,
that
formerly
team.
known as the football team.
Exactly. But he got released, so he's in play, and he's more of a Jamal Adams type, but that's a strong safety. You got Marcus Williams, who's out there, Terron Matthew, Marcus May, Quandre Diggs, Jordan Whitehead, Jaron Curse, Devin McCourty, Kareem Jackson, Justin Reed, Xavier Woods. And then you get down to Terrell Edmunds and Deshaun Elliott and guys like that. And it comes to me, and I just look at it and say, Terrell, I know that you probably want to make a big bang in the free agent market, but before you can do that, you probably need. You're still young. You're still 25 years old. If you sign like another 3-year deal, you'd be 28 and make another splash. Stick with the team that you know. Stick with the partner safety that you know, and Minkah Fitzpatrick. You'll put a good defense, and it works for the Steelers too because he's a glue piece for them. I don't care what anybody says. That guy is an important guy in the defense, and I think this is just too simple of a fit for both sides to not make this happen.
Yeah, it seems like it almost makes too much sense because for Edmunds, you don't entirely want to go out and test the market when it's such a strong class like this, like all those guys that you just named, because there are so many available that it's like, okay, some of these guys are going to get paid. Not to say that he wouldn't if he didn't test it out, but it just seems to make too much sense where it's like, you know this team, you know this system, you know your role in it, you know that ideally they're going to bolster some of the other areas of the defense. So you'd like to think that you as a unit will be stronger than you were a year ago. It does make too much logical sense. It's like, all right, like let's get a move on here, you know, sign, seal, deliver type thing, just because of what he brings. But also, you know, I mean, as the Steelers, you almost feel like you don't want to lose any more pieces because you feel like you have a lot of needs to fill on the defensive side.
Right. And that's my whole point is, and Terrell Edmunds won't cost you that much. Like you can pay Terrell Edmunds a legit $5 to $6 million a year, cap that. And it's also important to not pay your strong safety that much when you're going to pay Minkah Fitzpatrick a lot.
You know that's the other factor here is that eventually you're going to have to pay Minkah Fitzpatrick, you know, ideally a decent amount of money for what he brings to this team. And I think a lot of people, you talked about this a lot, but, you know, a lot of people last season were kind of like, where was his impact? And it was kind of more of the role he had to fit into because of what they had defensively. But when he can kind of get back to the role that he had, that we saw him in his first season here with the team, his second season leading up to this year, I think a lot of more people are also going to be like, oh, wait a second. That's you know, what he does so well.
Again, that's what I think is going to be crucial. You want to have guys that are going to free up Minkah Fitzpatrick to let him be Minkah Fitzpatrick, and Terrell Edmunds is a piece of that puzzle. Now, also the piece of the puzzle is linebacker, but another factor here that I think people that would say, well, Terrell Edmunds didn't put up great numbers. If you go to Pro Football Focus, and I don't use their grades as much, but I do look at their advanced stats, and if you take all the starting safeties who played like at least 80% of the snaps this year when it came to safety play, and you get like 21 different safeties in the league that are out there. He was targeted the 6th most times of that group, you know, throughout the season, for 50 times to be exact. And he allowed 9.2 yards per reception on those. That is the second lowest yards per reception allowed of safeties in that group. That says something that he's doing something right. Again, he helps cover receivers, tight ends, and running backs. It just makes a whole lot of sense. But Terrell Edmunds also, you know, being in this factor to help open Minkah up, you do need help at linebacker, and that can be in the draft. I've talked a lot about Devin Lloyd. I've talked a lot about, you know, guys that get like Chad Muma and guys in the middle, but there's also the potential to get guys that would be, you know, that would be a free agent and help right away and not take as much time to grow. Now, of course, Bobby Wagner was a bombshell to the NFL.
Yeah.
Whoa, that changes the market because going into this free agency, you're looking at like maybe Devondre Campbell, Alexander Johnson, Leighton Vander Esch, not like, you know, earth-shattering names, but Bobby Wagner is that now. Jenna, are the Steelers, are they in play for Bobby Wagner? Do you see this being the thing that they need to mark this down, get that guy, put him next to Devin Bush, and have him basically coach Devin Bush up, or is that just going to be one of those things where, hey, everyone else is going to go pay that guy like $12 million, $15 million a year. We're good over here because we're going to be focusing on other things.
This is another tough one, and I think at least the Steelers are going to do more than their due diligence here. They've already been linked to reports saying that they're interested, which shockingly, of course, why wouldn't they be? It's Bobby Wagner. At the same time, I feel like at least the way that I kind of see the Steelers are going to handle free agency is they're going to try and spend as much money as they can in as many areas as they can, shoring up the offensive line, the defensive line, depending on what happens with Stephon Tuitt, because we don't entirely know his future. Going out and getting, I really do think the quote unquote splash move that they're going to make is probably getting a cornerback, because again, we just talked about at length. But at the same time, I mean, what you could have here in your interior, I also think going back to Devin Bush as well, I think that we're going to see a lot more from him this season with the combination of him coming back and having a full season of recovery after his ACL and the impact of Brian Flores. That's going to be, I think, really huge in his development. But at the same time, getting a guy like Bobby Wagner next to him to be able to work with him in that way, we know that that's an area of need for the Steelers as well. Money-wise, it's one of those, you're not entirely sure what's going to happen, obviously, but realistically, I think that they do their due diligence. They see if it's something that'll work, and if it's something that they're going all in on, they're saying, hey, we really feel like this will be a really good addition for this team. At the same time, do they want to pay all of the money that they know that they're going to pay for him when they could spend more in different areas? I think I would guess more towards the latter than the former, but you never know.
Exactly, and that is a never know situation. But I'm kind of with you. They have so many other primary needs where they could spend a lot of money to solve that problem and get big bang for their buck. Also, the factor, Bobby Wagner's 32 years old. He's going to be 32 this year. And Dante Hightower's in the same book. You could go and spend and take a shot at like a Josie Jewell and not have to spend that much money on the linebacker position, or Leighton Vander Esch, though he does come with his injury concerns. But you could get another veteran presence in the linebacker room for not that expensive, and say, hey, we're giving Devin Bush one more year to figure this out. If he doesn't, we step off that train.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And I think that's going to be the case for some players this year, but I really do think that's what you'll see with Devin Bush, because that was something we heard Kevin Colbert talk about. He feels Devin Bush is going to be a lot better in 2022 going into 2023. And Devin Bush knows he has to be a lot better this season in order for the team to kind of keep him around the way that they had envisioned when they drafted him. But it will be interesting to kind of see, do they add that veteran presence and what cost does it come at? Because I think that's going to be something that will be huge in terms of the linebacker position as a whole in that interior spot. But at the same time, it'll be intriguing to kind of see where the money gets spent and how it gets spent, because realistically, I think it's going to be a lot more of like smart spending, but spending in a lot of different areas.
Right, I agree. Now, one smart spending place, and this will be the last one I go over with y'all. A sneaky thing here that could sneak up on Steelers fans they're not anticipating is the running back position, because Benny Snell ain't been proving it. They haven't figured out what's going on with Anthony McFarland and all that. They could use a veteran presence behind Najee for whenever he needs a break. Hey, go in there and give him some reps. And this would be this is an interesting free agent field to do that in. There's guys up at the top of the class like Leonard Fournette, James Conner. Those guys, I think those will cost like $6 million. Plus, James Conner, I don't think he's coming back to Pittsburgh to be the backup. He ain't about that life. No. But guys who would be further down the list who kind of intrigue me: Rashad Penny wouldn't take that much money. Marlon Mack wouldn't take that much money. Justin Jackson, James White, Raheem Mostert, guys that you could plug in and say, hey, Terrell Williams from the Chiefs, guys you can say, hey, you're not the A1 running back on this team, but you also know that you can fill a tough role here. That is an important thing for the Steelers behind Najee Harris that I think they could really use. You find a productive guy who, A, helps in pass protection, B, can catch the ball a little bit, and C, of course, run the doggone football without fumbling it. Those are things you can get. And a lot of those guys I named, you go to Pro Football Focus, their projections, all of them would cost you less than $3 million a year. It just makes a lot of sense to make that one of the sneaky, quiet buys that you make at the tail end of free agency when, people are kind of figuring out, when all the big buys have been made and everyone's figuring out the little buys that they'll make.
And at that point, too, obviously, knowing things to come in the draft along those lines. But, at that point, you kind of have a little bit clearer a picture. Did you add a big guy on the offensive line? Did you go out and get a center? Did you get a guard? Something where it entices some of these players more to say, okay, I'm going to come play behind this line, knowing, hey, here's who we have. And granted, you can't time things out perfectly. So, of course, that might not be the case. But that could be something, too, that entices some of these guys to be like, yeah, this is intriguing to me. This is a team I want to play for. I think we always hear too from all the free agents that come in, at least the ones that we've talked to in the last recent number of seasons here, and from the rookies as well. But people want to be a part of the Steelers organization. It's not, I'm not here to like throw shade towards any other organizations, but it's not the Jags or the Jets where, this is such a highly regarded and esteemed franchise. They always say, when you're a Steeler, your family, all those types of things. And those guys absolutely love being a part of that. And that really entices a lot of people from other teams to come to this regime here and see, what the Steelers are actually as an organization. Obviously sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't, but that is another intriguing factor too. So do you go get one of these veterans? It's like, yeah, I want to be a part of this here. I want to be, be able to be a mentor in this way. I want to be, I understand I'm not going to be the guy, but I'm okay with that because of the distribution here of what we're going to do. And, oh, by the way, because of the line that we have, or at least they're working on putting together in front of us.
Exactly. And another thing I still keep pointing out to people, the addition of Brian Flores along with Mike Tomlin, a lot of players like that. There might be some guys that are willing to sign with the team over some others that might help you a little bit in free agency. We'll see how this starts to play out next week. Jenna, thanks so much for joining us here on the show. We love having you here. It's great to have you back. Let people know they can find you, follow you, and get more of your work.
It was so glad to be back. I love it. Feel nice and refreshed and glad to be with you all on a Friday, our favorite day of the week. You can find me on Twitter at JennaHarner11, Instagram, Jenna_Harner, and on WPXI weekly and weekend nights. We got a whole lot of stuff ahead. So we're diving in here, getting ready for free agency and the draft and all the fun things to come.
Absolutely. This is it. There's going to be a lot of fun things going on. Do check out Channel 11 with all the great things that they do there. Sometimes you might even see me there, as that happens a lot. Jenna, thanks again for coming on the show. Thank you all for listening to the show or watching the show, whether you were listening to it on Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or Odyssey, or watching it on YouTube. Remember to like this video if you enjoyed it. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Subscribe to all of our channels if you want to get all of our daily content. Thanks so much for checking us out. If you want to help us out, give us a 5-star if you want Apple Podcasts with a positive comment. That really helps us out. Again, we'll check you next week when we start seeing how everything plays out on Monday. But until then, have a great weekend, everybody. Party safely for St. Patrick's Day and everything else that's going on. Don't do nothing too crazy, but we hope that you have a safe and fun weekend. We'll be back on your screens and in your ears very soon here on the Locked On Steelers podcast.